John, thank you for joining me here for a pre-event interview for NFT.NYC, which you and I will both be at and participating speakers at February 20th in Manhattan. It is great to see you again.
It's nice to see you, Ian. Thank you.
Yeah. So tell me about your experience last year. We were both there at NFT.NYC last year. It was the first event. You and I got to do a couple interviews. You spoke. You got to meet this community. Just give me a little insight as you look back at the event this last February. What are some thoughts on how that went?
I thought it was so interesting, and there was just a range of different entrepreneurs doing different things. There's a lot of activity in sports, and the panel that we're working on this year is going to be about the revolution. So you saw that beginning to form last year, and it's about digital scarcity. It's about merchandise. It's about memorabilia, and what's super interesting now, you're beginning to see the start of a discussion about the tokenization of different assets. So there's lots of places to go within sports. It's going to follow sort of like a gaming concept in certain kinds of ways. And I'm sure you feel the same way. I'm very, very excited to see what a whole year has brought, because the energy in the room last year was really, really palpable and powerful.
That's right. Now, you're the president of Kosner Media, but what you had done right before you started that was you were leading digital for ESPN.
Correct.
Can you give folks that aren't really aware of your background and, you know, you're a humble man, but I'll say your legendary achievements, and I won't be the only one to say that. Most people that know about what you and your team did at ESPN would affirm that and celebrate the things that you and your team did in digital. Can you give us just a little insight? Like, what was the 2-3 decades like as you helped ESPN transition from newspaper type and print, maybe TV, and really went into web and all the different facets that's become?
So it really was a miraculous ride. You know, you made the exact right point, which is that I was surrounded by brilliant programmers, engineers, etc. And in the time that I was overseeing ESPN Digital Media, which was 2003 through 2017, you really saw a revolution. You saw growth of streaming, fantasy sports. Really, the internet become the main event for sports fans. When we first started working on it, you know, we were like Rain Man. It was like, well, who would, you know, it's only the nerds would get on the computers. Now it's redefined. You can't imagine your sports experience without a mobile phone. And in that time, we went from essentially being a fast newspaper, the original incarnation of ESPN.com, to being, you know, a true video experience available on mobile devices, originally desktop, but by the time I left, 80% of the traffic was on mobile, and all of the breakthroughs that you saw in that period of time. And in sports, the effect has been profound. I would say, for instance, look at the EPL, look at international soccer in the US. That's really been driven by the internet. You know, that's how people were able to follow these teams and generate the interest. And this was all the while an era where you were sort of transposing some traditional media onto digital, onto a new experience. What I believe you're going to see going forward, if my experience is any indication, is a whole new set of services. So for instance, look at the growth of Twitch in terms of video services, interactivity, and streaming. Look at the growth of Reddit in terms of a community for sports. Look at Twitter and what that's done in terms of headline services. All of these things are expanding. You can find now probably more sports fans on Instagram than you can on traditional sports sites. And Instagram didn't exist when I started my career at ESPN. I started working at ESPN.com. So it was sort of a miraculous ride, but I really believe the most amazing things are to come. And we talk about NFTs and we talk about growth of crypto and blockchain, still nascent here in the US, but there's so much potential and so much desire to get these solutions out there. That's, I think, what I'm most excited to see is the first iterations of real products with good user experiences. Just judging by the entrepreneurs that both of us met last year, I really believe we're going to see some exciting things.
Yeah, the entrepreneurs in the NFT, crypto collectible, digital asset space remind me of the entrepreneurs in email 25 years ago,
yes,
and web development 20 years ago, and social media 15 years ago. You know, one thing that I find to be interesting about the sport connection that you bring and represent for this community is I was a big collector when I was a young person.
Yes.
So my first collections were coins and stamps. So I'd go and I'd buy all the pennies, I'd take them apart and I'd fill up books, and I'd take all my neighbor's stamps and I'd put them in the books. I eventually made my way to baseball and football cards. And definitely in the late 80s and early 90s, sports collectibles was like, it was on fire. And it
Yes.
wasn't because things were numbered. There were no jerseys. There were no bat particles. Like, it was just simply the fact that Topps and Donruss and Fleer, like, these companies had done a great job with branding and marketing, and they got people to invest their money in these assets that were valuable because everybody else said that they were valuable. That was really the basis for it. And of course, it was physical. You know, you had a card in your hand, but that card could have a range of value based on its wear and tear, which you'll never have in a crypto collectible digital asset market. I feel like the sports cards kind of took a nosedive, late 90s, early 2000s, and then they had to readjust, like, hey, let's limit things, let's add signatures and all these different things to try and, like, how do we get the market back? And I feel like there's some hope today that wasn't maybe there 5 or 10 years ago. So as you experienced ESPN creating digital as a way for fans to get more access than they ever had before, and for the actual professional athletes to have a platform like they'd never had before, one of the things that maybe was not helped, and you may disagree with me, but from my perspective, was the sports collectible side of things in terms of what was traditional sports cards. How do you see that maybe transitioning over the course of the next 2 or 10 years as people become more comfortable with digital sports assets?
Well, you'll love this, but one of the entrepreneurs that I have approached for our Sports Revolution panel is working on a treatment for sports cards as NFTs. Okay, so
Great.
I think it's coming, and one of the reasons is, imagine those physical assets really liberated with what mobile technology can do. Where, you know, in the past, let's say you and I wanted to trade cards, or I wanted to buy a card from you on eBay. It might cost me more to ship it to you than you'd want to pay for the individual cards. But when those
That's
become
right.
digital assets, and I can get it to you immediately, and also where potentially we could program into it some dynamic value based upon how the athlete himself or herself is actually performing in the season.
Yes.
You know, when you add that to the incredible marketing done by Topps and Panini and others, yeah, I mean, I think it could be reborn. This is just a classic example of sort of what's possible. So,
Right.
absolutely, the potential here to reinvent some models, or to create new excitement around things that people love to begin with. When we were talking last year, I said to you, like, as a kid, I used to go to Bat Day at Yankee Stadium, and I would get a bat from one of the Yankees, and it was great. And then I put it in my closet and I'd forget about it. Those whole collectibles are going to be reborn in a new world where, you know, it's not mutually exclusive, but I could also have that bat as a digital collectible, and I could show it to you, and or I could offer you a share of it as it increases in value. All these things are going to happen. in the NBA today, the Nike jerseys come with an application that allows you to get highlights about the player that that is part of what you bought when you bought the jersey. That's again a digital recreation of merchandise. We're only scratching the surface now, Ian, in terms of what's coming.
That's right. That's right. Well, here's going to be my last question for this interview. And, you know, I could talk with you forever, so maybe I'm going to want to jump on with you again before the event comes up. And it's, if you were to counsel one of the legendary actual pro athletes, so this could be Michael Jordan representing basketball, Wayne Gretzky representing hockey. Let's just say Alex Rodriguez, right? Because he's still in the limelight. He still has a lot of power. He launched the Players Tribune. Like, he's about the business still, even though he's not professionally playing. You sit down with Alex and you guys have a brief conversation. He says, okay, just John, in 1 minute, like, where are collectibles going? Because I don't really see the light at the end of the tunnel. Like, where do we go from here? How would you explain it to a pro athlete that is at Alex Rodriguez's level in terms of, he obviously cares. He has millions of sports assets out there in the world that are physical and digital, and he cares about his reputation, his legacy, all that moving forward. So what would you say to somebody that maybe is like, I don't understand NFTs at all? What are you talking about?
I'd say imagine a digital asset that is scarce. That there be one piece of Alex Rodriguez memorabilia in these different sets. There'll only be one, and that you could market that, and that digital asset would come with some value attached to it that would make it valuable and of interest to trade, and that you, Alex, as a personality, are incentivized in this new world to talk to your fans and to have your fans be able to, in some way, own a piece of you that just wasn't possible before, and that you can control the level to which you engage. But it's possible now to have some sort of relationship with Alex Rodriguez that wasn't through a third-party fan club or whatever. And the real thing to get your head around, Alex, is that we can create digital assets that are scarce. It isn't like, okay, well, once that video was shown, it's copied and it exists everywhere on the internet, so it has no value. No, we could create things where there's only one digital instance of that, and that can be easily traded. In as much as I might be able to persuade Alex, this makes total sense to the generation of athletes that are coming up, like on the Overtime Video Network, or you see them around gaming and Twitch. This is like second nature to them. And the success of young athletes doing this and developing their own little ecosystems will motivate older professional athletes who see the opportunity. But the key thing to get one's arms around is this idea that we can create scarcity, and that we can create individual things that are valuable, that will increase or decrease in value, but that people can trade, and they can trade them all around the world. The thing I'm really looking forward to is just improvements in the user experience, so that it's easier, so that the explanation that I just gave to you is intuitive and some sort of experience in some app that people get, and then it's going to take off. Yeah,
I agree. Well, like I said, I could talk forever. I guess the last thing I'll ask you to do is, can you invite people through this as we end the interview? If you're inviting people that are in the sports world, regardless of if they're agents, if they are sports memorabilia creators, manufacturers, distributors, marketers, if they're pro athletes or emerging athletes, regardless of what age or what sport they're in, if you had their ear for 30 seconds, how would you invite somebody to say, hey, you should come and be a part of NFT.NYC because?
All of us want to know what's next. And we're always frustrated when something becomes big and we didn't see it coming. This is the way to see it coming. And this is the way to meet brilliant young people and have a chance to influence the discussion and the direction of the next set of killer products.